players-only meeting, then they got swept by the Pirates. Yes, the Pirates. Griffin Canning out for the season, and fans are wondering if this team's June slide is the start of a collapse or just a midseason reset. But here's what we know. There still are games to win, and if this team is going to get back on track, it's got to start now. This is Straight Outta Flushing. Let's get to work. All right, time for this week's 7-line report. And Mets fans, there is no way to sugarcoat it. This week brought a tough 1-2 punch in Flushing. First, a brutal blow to the rotation. The Mets confirmed that Griffin Canning has suffered a ruptured Achilles tendon, effectively ending his season. He went down after throwing a pitch, non-contact injury, and just like that, one of the Mets' most pleasant surprises is done for 2025. Canning had been a rock in this rotation, a low-risk, high-reward signing who was exceeding expectations. He gave the Mets stability they weren't sure that they had, and losing him creates a serious void in the pitching rotation. And the team knows it. They are feeling it. Following Saturday's game in Pittsburgh, the Mets held a players-only meeting in an attempt to reset a season that some feel is dangerously close to derailing. After a hot start, June has been a different story. Inconsistent offense, slipping defense, rotation injuries, and a bullpen under pressure. It was time for the leaders in that room to speak up. The message from several leaders on the team was reportedly clear. Messages of accountability, urgency, and unity. The Mets, they still got time to turn this around, but with a challenging schedule ahead and trade deadline decisions looming, that clock is ticking fast. Well, Dugout Discussions time, and this week we're tapping into a prominent voice of the Mets fan base. He's one of the most passionate and plugged-in Mets content creators out there. You know him from Wardy NYM, his YouTube channel. My guy, Tyler Ward, joins Straight Outta Flushing for the first time. Wardy, what's going on, man?
Dexter, a pleasure as always, my friend, especially to be taking part in Straight Outta Flushing for a first time. I'm looking forward to that. Unfortunately, I feel like that's the only thing I'm looking forward to in today's discussion because it has been doom and gloom, and I'd say that's an understatement in Mets land right now.
Ah, man, it's doom and gloom. We're talking after the Mets got swept by the Pirates. Yes, they got swept by the Pirates. I have to say that again, just so people understand.
Yeah.
They got swept by the Pirates. I don't think we saw this happening. The vibes felt like it was good after they split with the Braves, and then it wasn't, Wardy. But before the sweep, the Mets held a players-only meeting after Saturday's loss to the Pirates. I don't know how you feel about players-only meetings. They're interesting, I would say. From your perspective, what message do you think needed to be delivered in a players-only meeting? And do you think the messages that we heard in the media will actually spark any change?
So this is all assumption on my point while hearing from people obviously throughout like the Mets organization over the years on kind of usually how things are ran. I don't know exactly to a T what happened in that conversation, but what I can say from the outsider point of view, obviously the Mets need to make it known amongst their players, especially with Francisco Lindor leading the charge in that conversation while having other people speak, because Brandon Nimmo did say 6 to 7 players, Juan Soto included, thanks to Mike Puma of the New York Post, with the initial reporting there. We do know that was more of that collective group breakdown, and I'm sure it had a lot to do with just the collective effort and them losing their ball games, you know, and whether it is kind of emphasizing certain individual player performances over others or something along those lines. The Mets know that they've been in an absolute rut, so regardless on if this is kind of the name blame or just coming together and really getting the collective point of view as to why we're faltering the way that we are, how can we get out of this rut, all those things I'm sure were had in said conversation.
Yeah, and look, sometimes you got to talk about things. You need to get it out there, put everything on the table, for lack of a better term, and we'll see if it worked. Now, the game that followed the next day, that did not help. They did not have any immediate results, but things can still change, so we'll get there. But with that said, Wardy, how concerned are you about the state of this team right now? If you had to put a number on it, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your panic level for the 2025 Mets at this moment?
You know, I just asked my viewers this no later than an hour from the time of us doing this recording right now, and the common consensus among people that I interacted with was a bit higher than myself. I was around a 3 to a 4 week and a half ago. Now I'm at a solid 6 to 7 in that range. I'm not at the panic mode meter thinking that, the season's over, you know, sky's falling, everything's collapsed, we're cooked. But right now, the Mets are cooked in the sense that when you drop 13 of your past 16 games and there's no immediate remedy of the horizon to really tell you that, okay, they're going to get out of this rut, That is why every Mets fan has their level of concern right now to their varying degrees. For me, I'm not, okay, we have a major problem, but no, there's no doubting that there's a problem with this club right now. And when you don't have the immediate answer, that also is a problem in itself.
Nah, absolutely a problem. I, like you, was somewhere around a 4 last week. I'll say I'm maybe at a 6. Getting swept by the Pirates will do that. Kind of puts you in that 6 range. Check in with us on that next week. But we got to talk about Griffin Canning because his injury, at least it feels like a devastating blow, right? Anytime you lose somebody with the Achilles tear, he's one of the more stable arms in the rotation. What does losing him do for the outlook of this pitching staff right now?
Oh, it puts greater emphasis on having the pressure on the shoulders for everyone who's healthy right now because it's a very Metsian thing to happen, Dexter. I don't know if you follow the trend over the years with Mets pitching injuries or injuries in general, but usually what tends to happen with the Mets, unfortunately, and I'm sure this goes for other fan bases and they can relate as well, but you have everything riding high and then bam, your ace in Kodai Senga goes down with injury. And then, okay, not even a week later, Tyler McGill goes down with injury. Okay, week or so after that, Griffin Canning not only goes down with injury, but he goes down with a season ender there with the rupture to the Achilles that we all saw live in real time. One, I feel gutted for Griffin first and foremost. This is a guy that's had right around a career 5-year array, but has been very respectable in his starts so far this season. I've had the pleasure of witnessing multiple starts that he had where he was on the winning side for the Mets there in the first half at Citi Field especially. But the Mets losing this piece here means that they lose a key arm that was expected to eat a lot of innings for them this season. Griffin Canning came off of what was not a fantastic season with the Angels this past year, but still posted 170 innings. I mean, there was great belief that Griffin Canning could eat more innings than any other eligible Mets pitcher that they had this season, injuries aside. So when you bear that in mind and knowing that they're already down these other arms, there's a greater emphasis than ever before, not only to get quality out of your starting staff, but to make sure that you make the proper decisions either internally or externally sooner rather than later to remedy what is now a glaring issue. If you didn't think that the Mets needed to acquire starting pitching leading up to the trade deadline before Griffin Canning's injury, I'm going to go on a limb and suggest that you probably are in the category of believing that they need to do what's right and actually add at least one arm there going forward.
Yeah, you would think so. One quick follow-up to that in the pitching, because I think you bring up a good point, whether the changes or fixing the issues come externally or internally. Okay, Blade Tidwell comes back up. I don't think that's excited many people or the fan base. I get the sense from talking to people, fans in general, they're done with seeing Paul Blackburn. Is it time to bring up McLean or one of the other youngsters to try to maybe inject some life in this rotation?
I absolutely think it's time, especially when you go look at guys like McLean and Hahn. The greatest counter outside of the lack of experience is the fact that they're not currently on the 40-man roster. But with guys like Jonathan, who could be Rule 5 eligible as soon as this offseason, there is an emphasis to make sure that he is on this 40-man sooner rather than later. And, the question in the case of Jonathan is, what else does he have to prove? He has a 1.73 ERA in AA, where many believe is the most difficult league in all the minor leagues, even more difficult than AAA, because you're really facing more the creme de la creme, if you will, the top prospects for most teams in that respective league versus others. So how much would he really benefit in Syracuse? Noah McLean, what has he been the most consistent starter that Syracuse has had to offer since he's been moved up there earlier this season? He's had a more consistent stretch than Brandon Sproat has when Sproat began his Syracuse stretch towards the end of last season. He's coming off of his 6th shutout outing, which is great to see for Sproat. I wouldn't be opposed to the Mets considering someone like him as well. But if you're David Stearns and you're the Mets, doesn't it make sense now, especially, to potentially consider one of your top pitching prospects for more than just a spot start like a Blade Tidwell, to actually have them getting turns in the order potentially before the MLB trade deadline, so that way you could be more proper about the decisions that you make? Maybe one blossoms to the point that you don't need to go out and add as externally as what you're initially thinking. Whereas if you don't give them any looks whatsoever and wait until after the deadline's done, then regardless on what happens, the Mets will have to deal with what cards that are dealt to them.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. Feels like it would be a good time to give one of those young guys a shot. Now, on the offensive end, it feels like this team is either hitting homers or they're doing very little else. What has been the biggest issue in your eyes with the lineup's consistency lately?
I mean, you just hit the nail on the head right there, Dexter. I love home run hitting. Who doesn't love home run hitting, right? But the flaw that the Mets are having right now is that they're taking, a page out of the playbook that's, solo in every way, shape, and form. And that is the home run ball. And because they're constantly hitting these solo home runs and not consistently producing with runners in scoring position, color me surprised. If you don't know, Dexter, that's been the big bugaboo for the Mets all season long. That's why they are currently a bottom feeder in Major League Baseball right now, as a matter of fact. The Mets, at the time of us having this discussion right now, are still a bottom seven team in all Major League Baseball and overall statistics when it comes to runners in scoring position. When you look at the Mets, especially over their past 2 weeks of play, while they are now 3-13 over this stretch, they are a bottom feeder offensively in the bottom 8 category per all baseball of Fangraphs, entering the 12-1 loss their series finale against the Pirates. So the long ball is an issue, relying too much on that, and the Mets are not getting nearly enough quality and consistency from their 5 through 9. It's been very sporadic. And then when they do get it, they're not getting enough from their core group. So there has been this large issue that we have seen this season where there has not been things in unison. But when getting to the pitch, when getting to the offense itself, the greatest issue has and will continue to be the lack of hitting late and close runner and scoring position type situations for this club.
Yeah, they failed to come through in those situations. So between the inconsistent offense, Wardy, pitching walks, I would also say shaky defense, you can add to that list. Which area do you think is the biggest problem, the Mets' biggest problem that needs immediate fixing? If you could fix one of these immediately, which one would it be?
Great question. And if you could fix one thing immediately, I would say the pitching. Because when you talk about lopsided runs, listen, I understand that the Mets have not been able to score too many runs as of late, but it's really hard to be inspired as a team when you start your ball games down 4, 5, 6 runs within your first 3 to 4 innings. And that's been the case for the Mets plenty throughout their entire series sweep, where they got swept by the Pirates, as was the case in plenty games prior. So immediately, the Mets need more consistency and stability on the pitching front, because that is what helped mask their offensive woes in the first 2 months of the season. That's why the Mets were deemed by many as the best overall collective pitching staff in baseball. But since that point, over the past 16 days or so, the Mets have a bottom 3 team ERA in all the game. That needs to change fast, because the more the Mets don't have quality arms, the more they're not going to have quality results here at the MLB level.
Yeah, it's things change real quick. In the New York Minute, they were at the top. Now they have not pitched like a top team at all, top rotation in Major League Baseball. If this team wants to stay in the mix, and I mean that's for the division, right, which they're still in the mix for, do you think they can rely on internal fixes, or does David Stearns have to be aggressive at the trade deadline upcoming up and get some arms and maybe a bat, some other guys in here? Does Stearns have to be aggressive here?
I think it goes without saying that Stearns needs to be aggressive, because even if the Mets go on to have a tremendous month of July, let's say everything goes right. It's the opposite of the June swoon, in which the Mets were just a couple games below 500, but when you're finish your final 16 games 3-13, that really feels like it tells a whole story. David Stearns last year at the MLB trade deadline for the Mets acquired Jesse Winker as well as Paul Blackburn and Huascar Brosman. Those were really the notable moves that he had made, and nothing was really of high quality, but rather kind of taking a swing and hoping that you can get the best out of these players. In the case of Jesse Winker, was fantastic. It was the best offensive acquisition that they made since Javi Baez under the Zach Scott regime in 2021. When it comes to Paul Blackburn, he quickly went down with spinal fluid leak that derailed the remainder of the season, so the Mets did not get any true added quality of the pitching there. And on the bullpen front, they didn't make nearly as many moves as they otherwise should have. Those are things I hope David Stearns learned from a year ago and can rectify and resolve this season, because if he approaches this deadline like he did a year ago, I think fans are going to have far more questions as to what David Stearns is not doing versus what he has otherwise been doing right the past year plus.
Yeah, it feels like they have to make some moves to fix this. Can't just rely on internal moves to get this done. We'll see if that happens as we get closer to the trade deadline. Now, this upcoming week, it feels huge. When you've lost 13 out of your last 16, it feels huge. 3 games against the first place Brewers, then the Subway Series versus the Yankees. All these games at Citi Field. How much of a show-me stretch is this for the front office to gauge where the team stands right now and possibly what they need to do with the trade deadline upcoming?
I hope for the sake of the Mets and their current construction that they've already figured out to a degree what is the results of this show me stretch, in the sense that I think we've seen enough the past 2+ weeks to get an idea as to what the Mets are doing wrong and what they need to do right. And knowing the woes that this team currently has, bears in mind why all of his fans are all the more concerned heading into this stretch of baseball. Between the Brewers, who are the hottest in the game over the past calendar month, and the New York Yankees, who, while they certainly have had their struggles the past couple weeks as well, this is the same Yankees team that still was able to handle the Mets fairly comfortably, winning 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium. And the Mets need to get a fire under them right now. They need to get that moxie going. And thankfully, being at home has helped them in that regard. The Mets on the road are 19-25. At home have, if I'm not mistaken, the best record in baseball. I expect them to still lean on that more, even after having the struggles that they did to the Tampa Bay Rays and most recently to a degree in the Atlanta Braves. They have to get things right, and there's no better way for that to hopefully start now by leaning on this crowd that will be roaring big time, regardless of the Mets' lack of play as of late.
Yeah, crowd is going to be pumped up to try to get this team back to their winning ways. We'll see. But we know this about the Mets fan base, Wardy. They are frustrated right now, and I will add, deservedly so. So for you, as somebody who engages with the fan base daily, what are you hearing the most from fans right now about their frustration?
I would be lying if I didn't tell you, Dexter, that the common consensus among many Mets fans that I interact with on social media as well on YouTube and other platforms is that they want to see a change. And the immediate change that you think of for an organization that's having these kind of lows is that if it's not going to be a change of substance via trade or internally calling someone up, then it might need to be someone on the coaching end. Now, I don't know exactly who that's going to be or if that'll all make sense, because we've seen guys like Eric Chavez, the Mets hitting coach, over the past couple of days actually go out of his way to post funny tweets that people have made about him, talking more down than being uplifting about Chavez as the Mets hitting coach. And we've also heard some things poke fun in the clubhouse. Something was written on the board there in regards to Chavez, just saying how much they love and appreciate him. So I don't know exactly how much Eric is feeling he's on the hot seat, if at all, but the fans have had this outcry for wanting there to be change in some way, shape, or form. So whether that means making a change on the hitting coach end when the Mets have both Eric Chavez and, mind you, Jeremy Barnes, when this is a regime that's been here longer than the current Mets manager himself and Carlos Mendoza. This goes back to the Buck Showalter regime. So you do have to wonder, at what point is there going to be further length of a leash, or things going to be cut tied in the case of either someone on the hitting end or in the sake of something organizationally changing there on the roster front, because we've seen a lot of quick internal changes on the bullpen end, but these are the quick DFAs that happen after 24 hours just for the sake of eating innings. The Mets are desperate right now to get some stability in the rotation, and whether they add someone via trade soon or bring someone up, I think it's imperative that they do something on that front and fast. Blade Tidwell is supposed to pitch there against the Milwaukee Brewers. I'm not exactly sure that's in the best interest of this team either.
Yeah, I think the changes probably have to come with the roster. I think there's always this easy thing that fans want to do, which is, I'll get rid of the hitting coach, and I'm not really sure how impactful that will be for the team at all. Okay, last thing for me here, Wardy, because you've watched this team all year, you are plugged in as anyone, and despite the recent skid, this team is still in a great position, as I mentioned earlier, to win the division, to make the playoffs. But I think the major question that we have here right now, who are the real Mets? Are they the team that we saw before June? Is it the team that we've seen this month, the last 2 weeks? Or are they somewhere in between those two teams? Does the truth lie somewhere in the middle? Who are the real Mets here in 2025?
Dexter, if I'm being frank, I hope we haven't seen the real Mets yet. And the reason why I say that is because even with this team 21 games above 500, not more than 2 weeks ago, nothing about their offensive approach is something that I found to be overly satisfying and one that I think would be sustainable while going down the stretch into playoff mode. Because you look at the New York Yankees, I think are a great example from this past season. They steamrolled through the entire year without a problem in the American League, while they had glaring defensive issues and clear lineup issues there, especially in the meat and bottom of order there, outside of guys like Judge, Giancarlo, and of course Juan Soto. And we saw that rear ten exposed big time in postseason play when they matched up with the Dodgers, not just because they were playing the Dodgers, but because the Dodgers were paying attention to the continued flaws that the Yankees had throughout the course of the season. When I currently look at this Mets team, I see a team that's had the exact same flaws with their hitting approach or runners in scoring position, so much so that it's been bottom feeder amongst all teams of baseball. They've been bottom 5 to bottom 7 consistently all season long. You can't tell me that that's going to lead to immediate success for this club when they actually are in a pressure cooker situation. So that is something that I definitely think needs to bear in mind for sure.
Yeah, need to keep that in mind. Mets have a bunch of things they need to fix. I have heard from some people, Wardy, some people want Grimace back in the ballpark at Citi Field. I don't know if that's going to change. My producer, Nick Federico, he's a big Grimace fan. I'm saying this sarcastically. He wants it back in the ballpark. The Mets just need to make some changes and play better, man. No Grimace, no OMG. Just got to play better. That's it. That's all I'm saying.
They got to play better, Dexter, and they need to kind of find something because as silly as that sounds, they need something. There is clearly an identity that is not there with this club right now, the way that they built one off those gimmicks last year. And this is not uncommon for this Mets team either. We've seen countless Mets teams over the years that really rally around the silliest things that the fans really rally around. And for whatever reason, it's added incentive, it's fun motivation. It works. For one reason or another, it works. And right now, there's absolutely nothing working for this Mets team. So my final thing actually that I have for you, Dexter, before we wrap this up is the following. When looking at the Mets' lack of gimmicks this season specifically, there really isn't anything with the exception of the sign that I know J-Mac Customs did a great job of making for the Mets this year in the dugout, but there really hasn't been anything else. Is there anything that comes to the Dome quickly that you think would be great, either to bring something back or to consider something completely miscellaneous to what an average fan is thinking?
And this is a good question because I was saying that sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's a really good question, right? And I think gimmicks, because we're being honest here, we're saying even the Grimace thing, right? OMG was a feeling and rallying around a song, which I thought was pretty dope, right? The Grimace thing, which my producer Nick really hates, it's funny, but you can't replicate that again. So it has to be, I think all these things that we're calling gimmicks have to be organic. So there's nothing off the top of the head. Whatever comes has to be real within that clubhouse, real among the fan base. And then you take it from there, right? You can't manufacture it in a sort of way. Where I agree with you, though, Wardy, they need something. They got to find something here that is going to change the vibe. And I love that you used the word identity because maybe that's the better word I should have used in the question I asked you. Like, if I said to you, hey, what's the identity of this Mets team? If we talked 3 weeks ago, you'd have said strong starting pitching. I'm sure we both would have agreed on that. But now that it's gone away with injuries, they don't have that. So now what's their identity? And I'm not sure I have an answer for that. Do you?
Their identity right now is a flawed ball club, in simple terms, in the sense that you can have all the success in the world, but that's a mask. The way that the Mets pitching and over exceeding expectations and mask the woes that they had offensively. And this was something that we all saw coming. So now that's all gone to the point where it's happening at the same time. That is not where I think that this is the Mets' identity, but rather how do they respond to this adversity will be a great example of what their identity is. Because the Mets built their identity last year off of their adversity, off of the fact that everyone doubted them, off of the fact that JD Martinez went out and said, no one thinks they're going to do anything, so let's just go out and do something, basically. And that's exactly what they did. I think the only way for the Mets to get back to a similar mentality like last year is to get back to that underdog mentality. It's easier said than done with having Juan Soto and the expectation now, but that's also been a great question for this team. How can they handle expectations, something that they're not used to with this core group? And we're seeing it in real time, how they handle the trials and tribulations that come along with it. So I think when you look at building this identity, that's a perfect way to get there, is to just take it day by day one, but just take it off of the high pressure cooker that you find yourself in of a situation, take a step back and try to go back playing loose and playing the game where you have the expectation that everyone thinks that you're not going to win. Go with that mentality, and that will hopefully steer you all the way. As far as the NLCS a year ago, how far can it take the Mets this year with Juan Soto on their squad and whatever they potentially do at the deadline? So just some things to think about.
No, it is something to think about, and it's a time where Juan Soto has had one of the best months that a Met has ever had, and the Mets have been struggling 3-13 over these last 16 games. You know what? And this is what I'll say as we wrap. You asked me what the thing is I think they could use, and Wardy, I wonder if it's just a comeback victory or a couple of victories where there was a little improbable that you didn't think they were going to win. You get a couple of those in a week, and the confidence rises. It doesn't have to be a gimmick thing. We don't have to get Grimace. We don't want to see you dress up in a Grimace suit. Nobody wants to see me dress up in a Grimace suit, that's for sure. But just, maybe some good old-fashioned rally comeback wins. That might be what the doctor ordered here. Just might be. We'll see.
This team needs a Mark Vientos walk-off bomb like what they got last season. They need, after the if it's not going to happen before the All-Star break, that absolute latest after the All-Star break and Alvarez return and he goes back to hitting for power. They need something that they're not getting right now from still within, because we do know that they have pieces. Now it's just about actually putting this puzzle together, because right now it's all over the place.
It is all over the place. Somebody who's not all over the place, that is Tyler Ward. Check him out. Fantastic YouTube channel covering the Mets. He is as plugged in with the Mets fan base as anybody. Wardy NYM on YouTube. Please check it out. Wardy, I appreciate you coming on with me. First time on Straight Outta Flushing. It will not be the last. And I hope the next time I talk to you, the Mets have figured some things out. We just hope.
Yeah, Dexter, I want to go back to the winning ways. I never have a fun time having to chop it up with you when I want to be all happy and jovial. And we got to talk about the Mets dropping 13 of their past 16. Thank you again so much for having me on. Always appreciate it.
Anytime, my guy. Thank you. Time for this week's Mets Mention, where we show love to the best, weirdest, and most amazing things from Mets fans on social media this week. First up, giveaway gear gone wild. Mets superfan and my guy, WFAN host Evan Roberts, was spotted rocking the bucket hat from Thursday night's game. And you're wondering, okay, well, what's wrong with that? Well, nothing. Bucket hats, not my particular style, but they're fine. But it's how Evan was rocking the hat with the back flap folded up. Interesting. So, of course, social media had questions. Is it a new look? Is it a cry for help? Maybe. Or is it just a new version of a rally cap? Don't know. Either way, Evans committed to the Mets. He was focused on the game, had his scorecard in hand with him, and that's what matters for the game. But next time, keep the back flap down, Evan. It's just a better look. Next, we got to shout out SNY Mets reporter Steve Galps. Did some great reporting for the people. We appreciate it. Steve gave us an inside look at what PitchCom actually sounds like during a game. That's right. He gave a live demo straight from the sidelines. Check it out.
You know, guys, one of the things that we talk about often over the last few years has been the PitchCom. And honestly, we started thinking we've never heard what the PitchCom actually sounds like until now. Here you go.
We're seeing fastball, curveball, slider, changeup, sweeper, cutter, sinker, in, away, up.
Really feeling the voice chosen, but I do like the fact that you can customize the voice, which has me wondering how many Mets pitchers have a customized voice for their PitchCom. Just something to think about. Wonder how many do that, because that voice, not really good for me. And last but certainly not least, meet the Mets, or should I say meet the Martians. Yeah, you see it right there. These fans went full Area 51 at Citi Field this week, dressed up in alien suits, busting out moves, if you actually want to call it that, in the stands, but no word yet if they beamed up a win, because the Mets really have needed some lately. But they did prove that Mets fandom is out of this world. Bucket hats, PitchCom voices, dancing aliens, just another week in Flushing. Keep those posts coming. You might end up in next week's Mets Mention. Time for the final out, and as June wraps up, the Mets, they find themselves stuck in offensive fog. Yes, they've had some big swings, but when the ball isn't leaving the yard, this lineup hasn't found enough ways to create runs, and that has absolutely been a problem. So let's talk numbers. 26 games since June 1st, the Mets are 12-14, not good, with 8 blown lead losses. Offensively, they've been boom or bust. They're second in Major League Baseball in home run fly ball rate and third in percentage of hits that leave the park. Over half of their runs this month have come via the long ball. But here's the problem. When the ball stays in the yard, so do the runners. Their infield hit rate is second worst in baseball, and they're struggling to manufacture runs in any other way. And then there's the third base problem, where production has basically vanished. Mets third basemen have hit 175 in June. That's dead last in Major League Baseball. On-base percentage, 221. Slugging, 289. They struck out nearly a third of their plate appearances, and against lefties, they're batting .095. That's a real number, people. .095. Yikes. Between Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio, it's been a mix of cold spells and missed opportunities. Beatty, he's shown a little bit of life lately, but off-speed pitches continue to give him problems. With Mark Vientos now back, we'll have to see if he can return to the production we saw from him last season. With Juan Soto and Pete Alonso carrying the load for this lineup, they need another bat to step up. And right now, that spot at third might as well be blank. If the Mets want to return to the top of the division in July, it starts with finding consistent production from the hot corner, because right now, the only thing hot about third base is the seat. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thanks to my producer, Erica Block, associate producer, Nick Federico, editor, Corey Porter, and production assistant, Tommy Cohen. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll return next week with another edition of Straight Outta Flushing.